let us all do we can to build a better future.
Okay, so and now talk about another fee, or another cost.
Oh, no.
All right. Inside Radio reports that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has decided that it's going to hike the annual fee on most radio stations by 13% this year. So, and there's an example of here. Now that's bad enough. But when you consider that many radio stations now are small independent stations that communities absolutely rely on for local news and information, probably one of the most viable way, you've heard me say this before, but it's really the most viable, efficient way of getting local news and information to people to build communities. I'll give an example here. There's a news talk station in Florida, WNRP Gulf Breeze, 1620. The station has about 8 people on its air staff, and with about 9 hours of live and local programming each week. That's a good amount of local programming that they've got 9 hours a day. Labor costs are through that period of time have been $2,028,000, but the net income of the station is only about for each month about $32,000 after paying all their expenses. And if they have to go to an annual fee of $2,685, it comes out to close to 10% of this guy's net income. He's trying to run a business here. We know a lot of these small stations have been going out of business. I reported a couple months ago that there were stations down in Uvalde, Texas, that were going out of business right at a time when a community absolutely needs local media. Yep. They just sold for $200.
$200?
Yeah, for those 2 stations.
Oh, my God.
Okay, and this is the kind of thing that can push local stations and local media out of business. And they're basically saying, look, to the FCC, can you give the little guys a break? It's one thing if it's owned by, Cumulus or iHeartMedia or something like that. But when you've got an independent station like this, this can really take out a lot from their budget.
I remember us during the pandemic when we were covering how a lot of stations were closing up shop here in Chicago, or a lot of people were being fired, or a lot of stations were downsizing. And this was our concern in 2020 when we said, when this pandemic passes, be prepared to see a lot of local media stations, radio stations, TV stations, newspapers start getting screwed over, start getting shut down. And the FCC, once again, bringing its hammer on the small working stations, the local stations. It's heartless on their part, because you never know when you need that local station, especially in a lot of rural towns. I mean, Chicago's a big metropolitan city. So, I mean, right off the bat, I know that our media is there.
We've got it.
But we're speaking for ourselves.
Right.
We're
not
good.
speaking for these smaller communities.
Right.
Where, and there are still some areas where internet's not all that great. People don't have it or don't know how to use it. A lot of older people don't know how to use it, period. And that's not going to change, at least for a while. And, a lot of newspapers have gone out of business. Exactly. And you've got TV if you want it. But, for many people, listening to local radio is incredibly important. And what they pointed out here, the National Association of Broadcasters has even said, look, can we just cap fee hikes to 5%? Apparently that's not going through. And if this fee does go through, the annual fee will have to be paid by October 1st, or their application won't be processed. And there's also they also have the authority to charge a 25% mandatory late filing fee. Wow. So, I mean, again, it's just a difficult thing for these small stations. If you've got a large station, it's one thing. But it's kind of like what's going on with the student loan stuff. People just don't know if we're going to have the extension or not, and they're trying to prepare. And you've got these effectively small businesses that are facing that. 13% is a lot.
Agreed. These smaller stations, they're the backbone to a community. Yeah. So in rural states, let's take, for example, let's look at Kentucky or Montana or Arizona or South Dakota, North Dakota, or even some rural parts here in Illinois, right?
Right.
These small stations inform people if there's a weather catastrophe, if there's some other unforeseen event, or God forbid, look, I don't want to say it, but if there is some sort of shooting taking place, at least said community is aware that something is happening. Being left in the dark, this is how you get people to be confused and scared, and then they're asking for accountability from their politicians, and yet there's none to give because there's no local media.
There's no local media at all, and it leads to people mistrusting each other.
I also want to bring up something else here too. When you have all the local media stations being shut down, or either that they're dealing with these ridiculous back and forth fight with the FCC. I want to remind everyone that as soon as people are left out in the dark, how do you expect them to react? How do we expect people to react? Just be kind and be like, oh, well, the news didn't tell me. This is how we lose faith in our institutions, like you said before. And this is, again, how misinformation is shared, and then people are left in the dark, and they don't know what to believe anymore. So,
exactly.
It's inhumane on our part as a nation. And again, when we look at how smaller media stations are dealing with this fight, I just want to remind everyone, you could thank the Clinton administration with the Telecom Act for making this environment happen in the first place.
Yeah. And just the fact that the federal government has not pivoted and started to say, okay, look, we're not going to allow a single corporation to own 5 stations in a market, and we're not going to allow them to hoard bandwidth so they have a duplicate station on different bands all over the place. If there's room, there's bandwidth available, there's room on the bands, the first priority is going to go to local media. If there's a local media station that can show that they have the cash reserves and the ability to take over this and meet FCC standards with regular programming, we're going to give it to them first. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, there are all different ways of getting news. So why not make sure that the bandwidth goes to the people of a community rather than a corporate interest?
Right on.
And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.